And now we would like to get to our history maker for the evening. She is a fabulous woman. She's a friend of someone I've known for a while, someone I admire greatly. She is a powerhouse and she cares about our community deeply. She's always been involved with community. She was born and raised in Mexico City, and she studied in Spain, Switzerland, and the US. Ana Valdez, who is our history maker, along with her husband, Jeff Valdez, founded a production company, the Valdez Production and Consulting, and currently she is the executive president of the Latino Donor Collaborative and the chair of trustees of the Southern California Public Radio. But she has an amazing history. Ana has worked at the United Nations Commission for the Human Rights as a presidential appointee for the Clinton administration, and she collaborated with the Nielsen's, Citibank, Colgate, Bristol-Myers, Squibb, Scott Paper, a lot of different corporations. She also consulted with Bill Richardson for the president when he was running for president, and she has worked with Dolores Huerta and so many other organizations and Latino community organizations. She was also on Fox 11's, she was the on-air political and media analyst and a blogger for My Fox Parents, Huffington Post, and CNN Online. Did I tell you she was accomplished? She sure is. She currently lives in Los Angeles, where we all are, and she is here with us to talk to us about what the Latino Donor Collaborative, where she is executive director, what they are doing, all the wonderful initiatives, and they speak for all Latinos and Mexican Americans at a very, very high level. So it is my honor and pleasure to welcome Ana Valdez to the History Maker event. You are a history maker, Ana. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Val. That introduction was way too generous, and I really thank you because you're one of my idols. So coming from you, it's really great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, you and Jose Luis. I am so excited about sharing some of the ideas and just being part of this organization. It's so powerful. Trini and John, I am a huge fan already of what you're doing. Just while you were presenting, it's incredible. I am good friends with David Hayes Bautista, which is on the side of California, uncovering California history of Latinos. And I think we have to gather the two of you guys' efforts, because we need to know our history. And you know what? This is what we always say at the Latino Donor Collaborative. This is not good for Latinos only. This is good for the whole set of Americans of any race. It is unheard of not to know the history of your own country because whoever wrote it decided to leave those things out. So thank you. Also, just if I could, I would just talk about what John and Trinity said all the time, but I know we have to talk about other subjects. But just to finish, Trini and John, I was, as Belle said, I was born and raised in Mexico, and when I moved here, which was late in my life, like I moved here when I was 28, I was baffled when my kids started going to school of how the story is being told, because I learned my history and I was a history buff in Mexico. And it's like you're talking about two different countries, literally. It just doesn't make sense.
Yes, I agree.
Isn't it true, Jose Luis? You were also born there.
Ana. And we are so honored to have you, by the way. We're very, very excited. It's a very special event for us. And as you know, we have had before you some great history makers, Luis Valdez and Alex Nogales and Ambassador Julian Nava. And it is just so happened that today we have, for the first time, we have a Mexican American that was also, that actually is born in Mexico, So you are the first.
Great.
We love to have this event because we want our friends to know who we really are. And you're somebody that we're very, very proud of. And so the purpose, as you know, of this event is to let our friends know more about these incredibly successful people, their stories, And because we want people to emulate who you are, you know, we want people to learn how you have become this powerful woman that is shaping the future of Latinos and Mexican Americans. So let me ask you a few questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And then, I mean, we're so eager to listen to your story. So you already said you were born in Mexico City. Now, I think many being, especially that you're the first Mexican-born history maker of our series. Tell us a little bit about how that feels. And you already started telling us, and that was very interesting to hear, you know, the story of Mexicans in Mexico is such a different story than the Mexicans here. Tell us a little bit about how does it feel to be born in Mexico City?
Absolutely. So I feel like I live so many Mexican hats, right? I mean, first, the one that is mine and comes with my origin. I was Mexican for, you know, in Mexico, we have other kind of problems, but very different than the ones that happened here. Then I became a Mexican American immigrant, right? I'm an immigrant and, you know, but then I married a guy whose family came here in the 1520s, who also considers himself Mexican American. And then I heard all the story of the New Mexicans, Colorado kind of Mexicans, and it's interesting. There's so many stories, and of course I have uncles that were born and raised in Texas. So to your question, it is incredibly rich, and I am proud of every one of those parts. And it is devastating that that story is not being told, right? The New Mexico, the Texas, the California story. This is, we are all these people.
Yep. Yeah, our story has been told so poorly. Actually, we've been hidden out of this story, right?
Exactly.
So one thing that you tell us, and we know about you because I've done some research about you, Ana, is that you love education. And it's very interesting how we have found that many of our history, or all of our history makers, have that in common, that they all search for education. Some of them were not rich when they were born, and they struggled to get education. You love education, but your story might be a little bit different. And I would love to know, I think we all want to know, how is that you become so much in love with education, of history, as you mentioned? Tell us a little bit about that.
So when I was born and raised in Mexico, it was a time when, you know, it was different, but women were not in general meant to be in the executive world, right? In the decision-making world. It is not like here, it's a different kind of, I don't even want to say discrimination, because I never felt discriminated, but we have different roles. Even now, things have changed a little bit, but in Mexico, people have different roles. And I personally never felt like I had that role. Like I was not meant to graduate from high school or from college and get married and forget about everything else. I just was never, right? My grandfather, I was the first, you know, granddaughter and grandkid actually. And so my grandfather always said, no, you're not learning to cook and you're not learning to type. And so I just, you know, my only chance was, okay, I'll learn biology and I'll learn history. And it was celebrated in my family, which I am so blessed for. And that's how I became a huge, you know, empowered kind of woman, education advocate, because it allowed me to really live the life that I wanted to live.
Yeah, that is so wonderful. And I, you know, being that you're so involved in helping the community in so many different ways, and you're so knowledgeable about this, I have an important question to ask, and I think many of our audience would be interested to know. I mean, in your case, and I think many cases that we have, you know, in our previous interviews, we see that a strong family support is so important for people to grow and be so successful. How do we change that? How can we help other people that maybe don't have the fortune of you know, people like you? They have a great family that prop them up, right? What do you think?
Yeah, you know, I have a theory, and I have some numbers to prove the theory, of course, you know, and everybody has probably different point of views, but So as you know, at the Latino Donor Collaborative, what we do is data. We partner with a lot of different universities and we create a real image of who Latinos are based on facts. So that's why research is so important. And one of the very important facts that we find is that the Latino community is extremely focused on education. And that is one of the most important parts of why we have a very high economic upward mobility. So I don't know if I'm sure, and I would love to share some links, but when people actually analyze upward mobility by race, Latinos go a little higher than whites, almost like Asians. And everything has to do with the focus on education. Even people that come here with absolutely no education, they believe that part of the American dream they came here to find is send their kids to school, to a good public school whenever it's possible. But even if it's not great, they have to go to school. And last piece of data that I'm gonna share on this is that the dropout rate in 1990 for Latinos was 69. The dropout rate today for Latinos is 93. I'm sorry, not dropout, on the contrary. The high school graduation was 69% and today is 93. You're talking about, imagine Mexico with a 93% graduation of high school. We would be competing with the United States directly. So here Latinos graduate 93% of the times from high school. And the best number that I love is that 69% of those graduating from high school enroll in some kind of college. So to your point, Jose Luis, yes, I think we have to help people that don't have support, but we already come with a lot of, in our DNA, we have this passion for education.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful news that I think all of us need to know. And I think tonight we're learning so many things. And that is a very important thing. You know, it should make us all very proud and very happy that it's true, you know, that we believe in education. And certainly you have proved that. You know, you study in Mexico first in the Tecnologico de Monterrey, then you study in Europe. And then you have, I mean, obviously, because you're a hard worker and a good student, you got an opportunity to work at the United Nations organization in Geneva and the Human Rights Commission. Mm-hmm. So what would you tell us of, you know, of this amazing opportunity? What did you learn? What can we learn from that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. My theme, my motto is, you know, be in the right time at the right place. It's about being prepared for opportunities. And if I told you how I ended up in each one of those places that are so amazing and that I'm so proud of having been to, was exactly that. You know, you do the hard work, you open your eyes and find opportunities. And the great news is you have what it takes. And so one of the greatest things about America, in my opinion, about the United States is this American dream, right? And I feel like, you know, when you do your homework, when you're prepared, the opportunities are there and you take the opportunity. And it is basically that, I tell my kids, that's basically life. You know, prepare yourself. God knows what's in front of you. But by the time the opportunity comes, you'll be ready. And it's a little bit of what I can tell you, you know, with those opportunities.
I think that's what they say. Luck is a combination of preparation and opportunity, right? Yeah. So it's not luck. It's never luck. It's the hard work, as you said. You're prepared, and when you have the opportunity, you take it. Yeah. You had an opportunity that I think very few people would ever have. You actually had the opportunity to work with the Clinton-Gore campaign. You know, and then with that, you build a relationship, obviously, where Bill Clinton asked you to be a special assistant for Latin America at the U.S. Department of Energy. So, you know, again, we're very proud of you, and we want to learn from you. We want to know what did that teach you that it will teach us.
Yeah, you know what? I was lucky to be at the right time at the right place. When I came to the United States, was actually doing my thesis for a PhD that I actually have never done, and I'm not happy about it. Eventually one day you're going to see this old lady going into school again, and I'm going to get my PhD, but I didn't. I came here to do my thesis, and I really got lucky because my thesis was a mix between marketing and politics. And I had an aunt that knew somebody in the volunteer department at the White House that got me a job as a volunteer, as an intern. I was young, and so as an intern, right? I had a master's already, so that helped. But I worked there for 3 months, and my bosses liked my work. I am a little obsessive. I have to say I'm a little OCD. You know, I was sometimes the first one to arrive and the last one to leave. You know, was really kind of into what I was doing. And so the campaign started, and they said, why don't you just go out there, work in the campaign, and when we come back, we'll consider an appointment. And I came to California, actually from Washington, D.C., and I worked in the campaign here. And it was fascinating to start with because it was exactly what I loved, which was marketing and politics. And then by the time Clinton and Gore were reelected, they offered me to be the head of the volunteer department of the transition team, and later on the inaugural. And so I was in charge of managing 5,000 volunteers, you know, from, you know, volunteers from the Boy Scouts and the, you know, ACLU and every organization that wanted to send people to volunteer. And it was a great introduction to the next administration, which was the second Clinton Gore. And I got an appointment. And so again, it was so interesting because yes, I never did my PhD. I never finished my PhD yet. But I got a great opportunity, and I got to see, you know, history in the making. And contrary to what happens right now, Clinton was really admired in the administration. So the people that were working for him, they loved him. It was really a little bit of a cult, if you may. And so people were happy. They wanted to make a change. It was a very young administration. And so there was a great atmosphere. And it was when the Latino caucus and Latino appointees started getting very important and very, very powerful. There was a whole department within what is called presidential personnel, which is the department within the White House that gives presidential appointments. There was a whole department within that department for Latino appointments. So, it really was a fascinating time to be there.
So what advice would you give, you know, many of our current listeners and future listeners on how can they get themselves in a situation like that, where they might be able to actually be involved in politics at that level and you know, move our community forward? What advice would you give them specifically?
You know, specifically for Latinos,
yes,
the advice that I'm giving lately a lot is get a voice. You know, I was raised with calladita te ves más bonita. and I believe that it's part of how we are raised in general in our culture. And I believe that that's one of the reasons why we don't have yet a Black Lives Matter, what we don't have a Jesse Jackson, whether you agree with him or not. You know, for example, in entertainment, when you know, people used to say, oh, Jesse is in the house, and networks and studios would tremble. We don't have that, right? We haven't had a Latino president yet. And I really don't think has nothing to do with merit. It has to do with the fact that we are not, you know, raised to have a loud voice. And so that's my first, advice is get a voice in the classroom, get a voice in your family, get a voice in your group of friends. It doesn't matter if you become the leader or not, but just learn to have a voice, learn to not avoid being controversial. I think that starts at home. And as parents, we should stop cutting our kids' wings when they have an opinion. Because as a Mexican mom, I have done it, right? Like, no, you're wrong. That shouldn't be happening. You know what? No, let's give them the space. Let them make mistakes. let them say silly things, and and just let them grow that voice.
Yeah, some of our previous events we've talked about the fact that we sometimes we're too humble. We've been raised to be too humble, and maybe that was just like in history we see how history really has an effect on who we are, and it really affects our opportunity to be more successful because we're too humble.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful advice. Thank you so much. I think, and so now we move into the next chapter, Ana. So now you're in Los Angeles. You have all these great opportunities. You have decided, which you mentioned already, that your passion was a combination of politics and marketing. And now you get together with your husband, Jeff, and you start really like putting all together and creating this exciting things, cable. You started a cable network. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a bit of what happened after that.
So it's so funny how life works, because I really never intended to meet Jeff and become part of of a company that produces content for entertainment. But long ago, when I was, and Jose Luis, you were born and raised in Mexico. Maybe you remember this campaign that was called Ciérrale. In Mexico, there was a big problem with the lack of water. That was, I don't know, 30 years ago. And the government created this campaign called Ciérrale, which meant like ciérrale, right? Like close the faucet. And they solved the problem because people became aware of, the way they were wasting water, and they solved the problem. And I remember thinking marketing and politics can change the world. So then, fast forward, and I married Jeff, and he has a production company. And I start realizing that we can make a lot of a big difference. We can really create a huge change, right? Exactly as you were saying at the beginning, rather than having shows about narcos and and horrible people being exploited, how about creating the shows of the Cosby Show for Latinos, or maybe the Fresh Prince for Latinos, because that will really create a change. And so we started creating content that was positive, that had that really created an image of all the spectrum of who we are, because I am madly in love with people like our housekeepers and our gardeners. And I mean, I think that that's the base that I adore. But you know what? I'm also madly in love with their kids. Their kids become doctors and lawyers and marketing experts. And so that's the spectrum that we have to talk about, right? And so we started creating that. And one of the greatest things that we've done is the Brothers Garcia. And I don't know if you've watched it, but it was for a number of years in Nickelodeon. And there are still grown-ups right now that say, oh my God, that show really showed me that I was a real American, that I actually existed. I didn't feel like I was being ignored. And at certain points, great investors, and this amazing, specifically an investor that I adore, whose name is Bruce Barshop, and his father, they said, you know what? Those shows are being really successful. How come we're not making more of them? Latinos are watching, but not only Latinos are watching, everybody's watching those shows because it's a good show and it's a good story. And that's how CTV was created. And we said, if we can program channels like ABC and CBS and HBO and Showtime, why not create our own channel, right? So that's how the channel was born.
Yeah, that's very, very powerful. And I agree with you 100%. I mean, what we need to do is we need to tell our story and all the different, just like the color purple, for African Americans really made a very humongous difference. Probably a movie or a story about John and Trinidad's story that, refusing to forget would be something that everybody should listen to. That would allow our community to understand why it was done, try to take away our land and our possessions, and how that brings that story down to the present. You know, I know that now you are the executive president of the Latino Donor Collaborative, and that's such a powerful organization. Is doing so much good for our community, and certainly we want to know, how can that help our audience? How is that? What are you guys doing? Tell us a little bit about your beautiful work, please.
Absolutely. So the Latino Donor Collaborative is a nonprofit, but it's a very different nonprofit, right? It's a very unique nonprofit because it is fully funded by the members. The board, basically, our board is a group of powerful Latinos that came from nothing, most of them, that donate money to create a real perception of who Latinos are. And we decided at the very beginning that that would be done by data that was fact-based, so that there was no, it was irrefutable. And the easiest data is the economic one, right? And because green talks, right? Money talks. Our job is to use that data that we create to show decision makers in this country the money that they are leaving on the table by not including Latinos. So in content creators, we say, you know why, and this is an incredible number that I actually just learned. Do you know why Univision nationwide has much higher ratings most of the nights than any of the networks in English? Because even though Latinos now, most of them speak English, they can't see themselves in English. So they are actually still watching Spanish because otherwise they are invisible. So we do that for content, the same as we do that for corporations. So your advertising is showing only certain communities and you're missing our community. There's a really great case with Baby Gap, who refused to put Latino looking babies in their advertising. And guess where they are? They are basically bankrupted, right? Because almost 30% of the babies being born today are Latinos. So if you don't want to put a Latino baby on your advertising, you're really doomed. Yeah. So that's the kind of argument that we do.
That's very powerful. Good job. Good job. It reminds me a little bit of some of the work that our good friend, and I know it's your friend, Alex Nogales, and the National Hispanic Association. Yeah. But I'm gonna ask you one very, we chatted before, and I told you I was gonna ask you some difficult questions.
Of course, absolutely.
So, and you told me that you wanted to. So I have a question about, specifically because we know you're a Mexican American. A little bit like me, because you're a Mexican American by choice, right? Because exactly. We both were born in Mexico and we both chose to be Americans, Mm-hmm. So one thing that we even said earlier today about the lack of unity between the Mexican Americans. I mean, one of it, and we have discussed this with previous history makers, we call each other by so many different names. Sometimes we don't even know Chicano, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, we don't really know, so there's a lot of lack of unity, and that lack of unity has made us, as you said earlier, very weak in regards to politics, because we're such a large number. We should definitely have a lot more influence. We should be able to have enough influence that we can start changing that narrative that exists out there, but we haven't been able to do that yet. But of course, with all the great work. Now, how do you feel about that? What do you think that we can do to create more unity, specifically between the Mexican American community? We know, the ones are born there, the ones that are born here, the ones that are multiple generations. Well, how can we change that?
That's a great question, Jose Luis, and it is in certain ways challenging. I think that, first of all, with immigration being negative from Mexico, as you know, there are more people living back to Mexico than coming in since 2008. With this anti-immigration wave, immigrants are not coming. So most of the people that are here that were not born here came here before 20 years ago. So I think that difference will start really fading. Their kids are born here. Their kids are completely integrated. So I think that difference will disappear little by little. I also feel that Gen X, the Gen Z's people, the kids that are 25 or less are incredibly powerful. I think they've been dealt cards that we never expected they would have, right? I mean, started with September 11, and then everything that the craziness that has happened in the last 12 years. And I do believe that those kids have a complete different way of seeing things. I ask my kids, they go to a school that is very multicultural. And so they come back and they say, or they're playing a, you know, football or whatever. And they come back and they say, Mom, I met a Latino. And I'm like, oh, that's so great. Where are their parents from? And they literally look at me like, I don't know, who cares? You know, they're like, I don't care. I didn't even ask. You know what I mean? It's this group of kids that really don't care. And that Alexandra Ocasio is extremely powerful because she's Latina. They don't even know where she came from or where, you know, they really don't care. Or Rosario Dawson, they identify with her. And it doesn't matter if she's Africa, you know, Latino, Afro-Latino, you know. So I do believe that we older people have to adapt to that. I think we really have to admire it and just join them.
Yeah. How do you feel, continuing with the difficult questions, how do you feel when you're continue to hear in the news this specific attacks against Mexicans, you know, and of course our friends from Texas know this, you know, then Laredo, there was a person that went and killed 30 Mexicans. He was like, I want to kill as many Mexicans as possible. It seems like there's always that specific thing against Mexicans. I mean, Of course you're Mexican, so I'm sure that hurts you, you know.
Absolutely.
How do we deal with that? How do we deal with that?
It's devastating. It is hurtful at every level, and it diminishes the country, quite frankly. It really diminishes the whole country. You know, it is hurtful. It makes me feel sometimes powerless. And the one thing I wish I could give you a solution, but the one thing I can tell you is that when I feel more powerless, when Trump launches his campaign saying that Mexicans are rapists and criminals, that's when groups like our group was born, right? That's when people start getting their voices out, knowing that it's survival time. You know, you cannot go on allowing people to say that Mexicans are rapists and criminals. That's when really they pinch your rib and they say, okay, are you going to talk now? Because if you don't, then when? Right?
Yeah, definitely. That has to activate all of us, right?
It has to. And we have to get out of our comfort zone and stop like this mentality of don't make waves. Oh, you know, va a caer por su propio peso. No, he won't fall by his own weight. Like we say in Spanish, you know, it won't happen. You need to, you know, to activate and have a voice, because what else can we do? And then use our information. And I tell all the audience, and I tell my wonderful co-panelists, use our information. You're not going out there saying, you know, don't be nice. You're mean to me, or I am charity. We're not. You know, according to every single report, Latinos are driving the growth of the economy. Latinos are buying 56% of all the new houses. Latinos are founding 83% of all the new businesses in this country. So we're not charity. You need us, America, much more than we need you. And I think using our voice with those numbers have to make people aware, because if we're not here, they wouldn't grow. We contribute. Our GDP, the Latino GDP, that's one of the reports that we have, is $2.3 trillion. If we were Latinos, were an economy, we would be this year we would be the 8th largest. And I say Latinos, Jose Luis, because I am a passionate Mexican, but I also know that numbers are in our favor. Almost 70% of all Latinos are Mexican. So when I'm talking about Latinos, I'm mostly talking about Mexicans. But the other 30-something% is also empowering for us. So I never forget where I came from. I love being Mexican. I'm fanatic about it. But I usually gather forces with other Latinos because I think our numbers will really conquer.
Yeah, I think unity is powerful. No question about it. I think that you have taught us so much tonight. I would love to ask you a final question, and that is always my favorite final question, and that is your you know, if you were to speak to young Ana Valdez at age 10, what advice would you give her?
Oh my God, that's a great question. I would get, besides having a voice and not being afraid of having a voice, don't be afraid of making mistakes. I think that is the second kind of lecture that I give to my kids. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Take risks, good risks. Don't go do drugs. That's not a smart risk. That's really stupid. Take risks in informed and positive risks that may draw you back if you lose, but that won't destroy you, because every failure made us better. And the 5 of us here in the audience, I mean, in the panel, tell me if it's not true. Every failure made you better. And the more failures, the better you become. So if I had one advice for young people, it would be, don't be afraid of making mistakes.
Very good. Well, I can tell you that I know I've learned a tremendous amount. I think I feel empowered after listening to your story. I think we hope that this wonderful interview will empower a lot of young Mexican American and Latino girls to want to be the next Ana Valdez. I can tell you that learning from John Moran Gonzalez and Trinidad Gonzalez, realizing and trying to remember, what happened to our ancestors, and that was powerful, because if we don't remember the past just keeps repeating itself, right?